engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Really be any competition, whereas now there's competition between these platforms and users actually have a choice. And this isn't even to mention DEX aggregators, which are these services that basically take the best price from go out and find the best price for you on each of these decentralized exchanges and sends it back to you and let you buy at the best price with minimal slippage, which is really, really cool as well. And I think, having a robust on-chain decentralized exchange infrastructure is extremely important for DeFi, because without liquidity and without this infrastructure in place, there are a lot of apps that can't work. So at Token Sets, we actually use decentralized exchanges pretty heavily to process buys and sells for different sets. So, say a user comes to the site and they want to buy, using ETH, and the set is actually positioned in USDC, their ETH would automatically get changed to USDC in the background through decentralized exchanges. So it's seamless for the user. And, that wouldn't be possible without a decentralized exchange or without an on-chain exchange, because doing that via a centralized exchange would technically be possible, but it would be custodial, it would take a lot longer, it would ruin the user experience. So that's just one example of why decentralized exchange infrastructure is extremely important and why growing it is extremely important. We need more liquidity in the ecosystem, and decentralized exchanges will bring that liquidity to us. All right, moving on to what I like to call the DeFi spectrum. Now, this is a really great image from David Hoffman. He's an independent Ethereum writer and is also part of the Bankless team that Ryan Sean Adams runs. I suggest going to check that out in the link below the article. But this picture basically describes how DeFi is today. So we have centralized to decentralized, and then in the middle we have semi kind of centralized, like sort of decentralized. Now, what this means is that something like Realty, which is a real estate platform that's on top of Ethereum, this is completely centralized. This is not, decentralized finance, because you actually need to do KYC and all the properties are managed by a central entity. There's not really anything kind of DeFi about it. And then we move on to kind of like the half DeFi, half CeFi things like Set, Compound, DYDX. These things have admin keys and they're not fully decentralized. Set has an admin key, for example. DYDX does as well. I'm pretty sure Compound did, but they're in the process of actually decentralizing their protocol through the use of governance tokens right now. And I'm pretty sure they handed over Compound to these governance token holders the other day. They actually destroyed their admin key, which was really, really cool. So that puts them closer to the right-hand side, which is their fully decentralized side, which consists of things like Uniswap. So for those who don't know, Uniswap is actually deployed to the Ethereum network in such a way that no central operator can ever change it. The contracts cannot be changed. To actually upgrade, you need to redeploy. And that's what we saw with Uniswap V2. They actually had to redeploy all their contracts and then encourage people to move over if they wanted to. They can't force anyone to move over, which is really, really cool. It means, fully decentralized protocol. Same with something like Augur. Augur is also built in this way. They want to make it as decentralized as possible. Maker kind of sits in the middle, whereas, there are arguments to be made that because of Maker's governance system, MKR token holders have outsized influence on the protocol itself, and there is a centralizing aspect there, which, and Maker relies on the Maker Foundation for I guess, to steward the protocol for now. But at the end of the day, this is where we are today. We're still growing these protocols. I can speak for Set and say that we have an admin key because we've got plenty of stuff we still need to build for the protocol. Our product only really works on chain, and we really want it to be on Ethereum. And one of our co-founders is actually the founder, the creator of the DeFi term. So we're true believers in DeFi. But, it doesn't make sense for us to become, decentralized, quote unquote, just yet, because that would ruin, I guess, the user experience, having to migrate people from, one protocol to another, just like Uniswap has. But the way Uniswap did it, I think, fit right for their protocol. But yeah, it doesn't fit right for every protocol. Even though these things can be centralized, they still play nicely with the rest of the DeFi ecosystem, because you still get the non-custodial aspect. You still get the fast interactions with these apps from your Ethereum wallet. You still get the no KYC and everything like that with most of these things. Not the fully centralized, but the semi-centralized, semi-decentralized, you still get these kind of benefits. You get the composability, the money Legos. You get the yield stacking, which is this new term of basically, putting all these protocols together and getting the highest yield on your crypto assets. And you still get like all the other benefits that I mentioned before. So This is really, really cool. So I wanted to kind of talk about that because there's a lot of people who criticize DeFi and say it's not really decentralized. It's like, yes, that's true. Like, it's a fair point. But DeFi is much more than just decentralized finance. It's also all the other benefits you get with it as well. That's why I like to refer to it as on-chain finance or open finance. And, DeFi is the goal. We want everything to be as decentralized as possible, but we're just too early. Like, as I showed from the user count, there's not that many users at this point. So building this out, making the best product is, I think, more important at this stage. So now that I've given a recap of like where we've come from, where we've been, what does the future of DeFi look like? So I think the biggest barriers for growing DeFi at this point in time are usability and scalability. Usability is being worked on and is something that a lot of teams are tackling. Scalability is also being worked on with a lot of different teams tackling as well, but it's a lot harder, I think, than the usability side of things. There's a lot of heavy research with scalability that still needs to be done. There are live things on mainnet today, but then the layer 2 scalability, for example, introduces new problems, like how do we share liquidity between protocols on these layer 2s? Are they as secure as layer 1 Ethereum? Are they actually decentralized, or do they have some kind of centralized, aspect to them that we don't yet, widely understand? So there are problems that need to be solved, and I believe will be solved. But those, to me, are the kind of biggest barriers to growing at this stage. But on the plus side, we have growth. We still have growth. The growth hasn't slowed. Volumes are increasing, users are increasing. As long as we keep getting more of this, it's just a positive outlook for me. The more people we onboard, the more developers we onboard, the better the whole ecosystem is going to become. And when we get to that point where we've kind of like scaled up Ethereum to be able to handle the hundreds of millions or billions of users eventually, that's when we kind of can say, okay, we changed the world. Like, there's a lot of people in crypto for those reasons, right? They want to change the world. They really want to make an impact. They really want to improve people's lives. But today, that is possible in a limited way. Like, for me and a lot of others I know, we only use centralized services to onboard into crypto. We do pretty much all of our banking and a lot of our investing through crypto. But that's for us. That's for the hardcore people. We want to onboard. I want to onboard my mum. I want to be able to give her an Ethereum wallet and say, hey, here's how you can do finance. And that's just not where we are today. But we will get there. We will get to that nice city in the picture there that you see. I truly believe that. But yeah. That's it for my presentation. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I'm happy to take questions from people for the next 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Anthony. That was really helpful and gave a quite good overview about the whole DeFi ecosystem. So I think I have a couple of questions like in the chat. Just a second. Yeah. So you mentioned about the decentralized aspect of the DeFi. So how do you think the oracles, which basically decide the price, play a role in this growth for the DeFi?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. I didn't touch on it in the presentation, but oracles are definitely a very important piece of DeFi today. They provide all the pricing data and more. And I think all the protocols that currently use oracles, you could argue that they're centralized around these oracles. If someone was able to get control, they could actually affect these different protocols. So I think that there's a lot of projects working on this. Obviously there's Chainlink and a few other projects working on this and trying to decentralize this as much as possible. But it's a hard problem. It's not something that can be solved. It's something that has to be kind of made to be as robust as possible. So we can make oracles as decentralized as possible, but I don't think we can solve the oracle problem where it's hard because getting real life data onto a blockchain is always going to have some kind of maybe I wouldn't call it centralized, but some kind of outsized influence on it. But I think we're going to get to the point where we can actually trust that these things are as decentralized as we can get them and as safe as we can get them. But I think for the foreseeable future, there's going to be that kind of risk with these oracles for sure.
Okay, thanks. So, Anthony, another question from Andy. He said that with so many new protocols and with DeFi experiments, how do an average people evaluate the security risk assessed with the DeFi protocols?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andy. So basically, I guess it's very hard right now for people to evaluate these security risks. I actually posted a blog post on Set's Medium page the other day, kind of going through all the risks associated with using Set protocol and token sets. And as I was writing it, I kept thinking of new ones, and I'm like, okay, this is a risk. This is a really high risk. This is a risk, and there was a lot. Like I did it because I wanted to explain to users in plain English what risk they're taking on, and then I realized, wow, there's actually a lot when interacting with these things. But explaining it to the average person is probably going to be a difficult endeavor, because at first that person has to understand the DeFi concepts in general. So they have to kind of learn about DeFi, and then they can kind of understand the risks. But even then, a lot of these risks are just very complicated. If you talk about smart contract security and bugs in those contracts, like these people that aren't programmers or aren't developers aren't going to understand that. So I think the end goal is basically to get these protocols to such a state that they basically don't really change that much, so that people, there's the risks are there, people understand the risks, but there aren't new risks introduced all the time. But for now, I mean, the big disclaimer over all of DeFi is that it's incredibly risky, and we've seen DeFi hacks happen. There's probably going to be more happening. So I think people should be wary about how much money they put into this stuff for now, of course.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think not many people tend to read those disclaimers and get stuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I have another question. Yeah. So I have a question from Michael. He said that a few DeFi projects, as you mentioned, were exploited recently. So he asked, what can the DeFi community do to help one another? Like, is there some kind of a PR process do you think we can develop, in the sense how the research works? Because go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say there was actually a great post put out the other day. I can't remember who wrote it, but it was talking about something called like a limited launch of these DeFi protocols. So when a new protocol is launched, if it's a very popular one, people tend to put a lot of money into it really fast, especially if it has a high yield on it, or you're able to make money using it. And this is obviously not a great thing to do, because new protocols, even if they've been audited and even if the developers are great, they can still have bugs in them. Like, no one is immune to bugs. What this post described was basically a kind of like a launch that was slow. So you'd launch the protocol, but you'd put limits in place. So you'd say, okay, you can only put this much money in the protocol, and once it's at that amount, then no one else can put money in. So, and all sorts of things like that. Basically, only having one feature go live with your project, and then adding more features over time as the protocol gets more robust, more eyes on it, and things like that. So I thought that was a really great post. But in general, just more education. I think we've come a long way over the past couple of years around this. No one really tends to deploy things to mainnet without a security audit these days. That's pretty much like a must-have. Users are demanding it. For Set, for example, we get a lot of questions in our Discord channel. Have your contracts been audited? What are the risks, of course? Like, how do I take insurance out? Which you can do through Nexus Mutual, which is really cool. So yeah, I think we're doing all the right things at the moment. And in terms of helping out your fellow person, your friend or your family member when onboarding them, you can just say to them, this is risky, it's new. Don't put in too much money, because there's a possibility that you could lose it. It's the same with any kind of investment, right? Don't put in any more money than you can afford to lose, sort of thing.
Got it. So for the people who are listening, I'd just like to comment that Anthony is a co-founder of one of the educational resources for Ethereum. I generally do read most of they update it quite frequently. So do read that before you try new protocols, so that you are at least aware about what is happening in and around the ecosystem. Anthony, I have a couple of last questions. Okay. What metrics do you think should be worth following to track the DeFi growth?
Yeah, so I guess the most popular metric is the one that a lot of people post on Twitter, is the value locked in DeFi. So as I said at the start, that's at about $1 billion today and has been growing quite fast. So that's a very popular metric. But there are a lot of different metrics. So in the presentation, I showed user growth from Dune Analytics. So if you go to Dune Analytics, they've actually got a bunch of different dashboards that you can look at for DeFi and the different protocols within DeFi for tracking this growth. So yeah, the two best ones are definitely the user growth numbers and the value numbers, but also volume as well. As I showed with decentralized exchanges, that's another one that I look at frequently. And I know I post a lot of this stuff on Twitter as well. I posted one the other day of new Ethereum addresses that are being created that have made at least one transaction with ETH. So you can create, for example, you can actually create an Ethereum address and not do anything with it, right? So this metric actually tracked with people actually interacting with Ethereum. So if they had transacted in ETH to pay for gas or something, that counted as a new address. And that was at 100,000 plus new active addresses a day, which is really, really, really cool. And this is like the growth over the last few months has been similar to the growth that we saw in 2019. So there's a lot of interest happening right now, and those are my favorite metrics to track.
Okay, thanks. So I think the final question we have is, what are the trends which you are seeing in Defi as of now in probably the next few months, and what are your favorite projects which you are looking forward?
Yeah, so the trends I think I'm seeing right now are the layer 2 scalability trends. We had obviously Matic go live the other day. Congratulations on that, by the way. And we've also got users trying out new things that the DeFi protocols are releasing. So Synthetics released their layer 2 demo recently based on optimistic rollup, and also was a Loopring also have a live optimistic rollup decentralized exchange today on mainnet. So that's what I'm most looking forward to, as well as privacy. So more privacy solutions, because obviously everything right now is quite transparent on the Ethereum blockchain. You can kind of track people. So getting more privacy solutions is a big plus right now.
Thanks, Anthony, so much. Thank you so much for your time and taking the questions.
That's okay. Thank you for having me. It was great being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much all for joining today. I think that's it from our side. If you have any, you can follow Anthony on Twitter.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.